I think I'm going to have to do something about you, Eleanor. The frustration in Richard's voice was undeniable. The slow drop of his arms to his sides only added to the weight of his disappointment. Eleanor noticed with regret just how let down he was, that, yet again, she'd refused to cross a certain line in their relationship, and he made no attempt to hide it. "I'm sorry," she said automatically. It was easier to hide behind an apology than to explain what she herself didn't fully understand. She loved him, yes, but something inside her held back, as if there were a wall she simply couldn't climb. She didn't want the night to end in bitterness. "Want to come up for some coffee?" "What for?" Eleanor sighed deeply, reaching for the car door handle. Richard, though usually kind, had his moments of impatience, especially when things didn't go his way. "Never mind," she replied. Her tone was sharper than intended. Regret hit instantly. She softened her voice, added gently, "Good night, Richard. Thank you for everything." "I'll call you tomorrow," he said, squeezing her hand. "I'm guessing you still won't come with me to visit my mother tomorrow night, right?" "I'm sorry. I promised Mrs. Whitmore I'd help her with a dress." "It frustrates me to see how concerned you are about that old woman," he muttered. "I know she's your landlady, but that's not it," Eleanor interrupted, offended, as if he thought she was cozying up to Mrs. Whitmore for convenience. "I care about her, and besides—" She stopped. It wasn't wise to remind him that Tuesdays were for his mother, leaving her free. "Besides, you've never liked my mother," he said bitterly. "That's not true," she lied. She remembered the coldness in Mrs. Dandridge's home, how that woman had never moved on after being left by her husband. Decades had passed, but the bitterness remained. She always repeated, "I never wanted a divorce, but the laws allowed it." Eleanor knew that speech by heart. "I don't blame you," Richard said suddenly, pulling her close. "My mother can be unbearable, I know." Before she could reply, his charm returned. "I don't want to go either, but if I don't, she'll call all night. I grew up under the weight of that divorce. That's why I need to be sure. I need to know that between us—" He stopped. His hands moved gently across her back. But for the first time, Eleanor couldn't return the affection. Her heart raced. Was he talking about marriage? Richard noticed her hesitation. He stepped back. "What is it now?" he asked, irritated. What did you mean by that?" "About us?" His voice softened. "You know. You said you needed to be sure before—" He let go of her. She felt cold, unsettled. "I didn't mean to bring it up yet, but since we're here, you know how I feel, and you've told me you love me. So, I'll be honest. I'm thinking about asking you to marry me." "Oh." A whisper. Joy flooded her, but so did fear. Fear of not being understood, fear of everything falling apart. "The only reason I haven't asked officially is because of my parents." "Your parents?" she asked, confused. She never felt at ease with his mother, but believed the woman respected Richard's feelings. "Their marriage was a disaster. You've seen how my mother still suffers. That marked me deeply." "You mean you think the same way about divorce?" "I think everyone must decide for themselves. But for me, once I'm married, that's forever." "I understand," she murmured. "I need to be sure, Eleanor, before I commit." 5 minutes later, she was home. Her head pounded. She should have told him. It had been the perfect moment, Coward, she thought, brushing her hair in front of the mirror. She looked at her reflection. Big green eyes, soft features. How had she kept it a secret for so long? If she had told him, she might be free now. Richard had said he admired her loyalty, but would he understand her loyalty to Martin, her stepfather? Still consumed by thought, she dropped the brush. She opened her mother's jewelry box. At the bottom, beneath costume jewelry, there it was. Her hands trembled. She unrolled the paper, read it again. Eleanor Grace Whitaker, seamstress, age 18. Married Andrew Prescott, engineer, age 30. A copy of the marriage certificate. The original was lost long ago, after Martin's death. Those days had been a blur. She carefully rolled it back up, placed it in the box. Yes, Richard would understand. Once she explained. In Eleanor's memory, Andrew Prescott appeared exactly as he had the first time she saw him. Tall, elegant, and looking oddly out of place at the doorway of her aunt's matchmaking office, Mrs. Marion's Eternal Matches. She remembered how nervous she'd been that morning. She'd gone to bed early, planning a lunchtime visit to her sister, Mrs. Marion Hale. "Is everything all right, dear?" Marion asked, her tone flat. "I can't say it over the phone," Eleanor replied, sensing that Marion wasn't in the best mood. "Is it about Martin?" Marion had guessed correctly. Eleanor fell silent. "Can we talk in person?" she asked, almost pleading. She had few options. Her aunt wasn't wealthy. She'd sold nearly everything the last time. "I'm busy," Marion said, her voice growing impatient. "Please, if you want to come, then come." And the line went dead. That sharp invitation, cold but still an opening, gave Eleanor a flicker of hope. She waited until lunch and went to her aunt's first-floor office. The door was closed. Marion had refused to help, and Martin no longer deserved more debts. Disheartened, Eleanor turned to leave, and that's when she saw him, Andrew, climbing the steps. Marion had promised never to help Martin again. Martin had sworn to stop gambling. Promises, both broken. As Eleanor turned away, she heard a soft knock and said without thinking, "Mrs. Hale is with her niece." Of course she wasn't, but who cared? A calm voice responded. "Looks like we're both out of luck." Eleanor froze. His grey eyes were steady, observant, not rattled by her coolness. "How old are you?" he asked, and shock made her answer on impulse. 18. "That'll do," he said cryptically. "Do for what?" she asked, alarmed. "To marry me." "Marry me?" Her green eyes widened, horrified. "I don't have time to explain. You're here looking for a husband. I need a wife." Her heart clenched. He proposed like it was a business deal. "No, thank you," she said, turning to go. 2 steps down, he stopped her with quiet confidence. "I'll pay you £500. The number stunned her. It was madness, but temptation was real. "We'll go over the details at lunch," he said. Before she could object, he'd taken her hand and guided her down the street. They sat at a restaurant. He spoke first. "I'm Andrew Prescott." "Eleanor Grace Whitaker," she replied, still tense. "I need someone to marry, legally, just a marriage certificate. No love, no relationship. Security, not affection." Eleanor took a deep breath. She understood more than he knew. "You want the paperwork?" "Exactly. And I won't keep you after the wedding." It stung, but she said nothing. Martin needed saving. It stung, but she said nothing. Martin needed saving. She had no other choice. "All right," she whispered. That's all he needed. "Good, works for me." She asked why he needed it. "My father said he'd disinherit me if I wasn't married within 3 months. He died recently." She blinked. This was urgent. He explained Lydia, his stepmother, had pressured the will's changes. He had no time or desire for a real marriage. She understood. Friday, 3 days from now. The registry office. Eleanor nodded, feeling the weight in her stomach. He gave her his number, asked about Martin, but her aunt knew nothing. That Thursday night, she saw Martin sitting quietly by the fire, crushed by guilt. It was then she knew she had to do it. On Friday, she dressed plainly, nothing that would draw attention. She kissed his cheek. "I'll try to be home early tonight." "Take care, dear." She left, with the weight of a marriage certificate on her conscience. After 4 cups of coffee, she arrived, breathless. Andrew was already there, calm. "Sorry I'm late," she said, steadying her voice. "You came," he replied firmly. "That's what matters." He led her into the registry office. The judge noticed her nervousness and smiled to ease it. Moments later, it was done. They were husband and wife, Mr. and Mrs. Prescott. In the hallway, Andrew handed her an envelope. "Here's your part," he said coldly. "Now we can keep this quiet." And he left. Eleanor sat down, emotionally drained. Inside the envelope, £500 and a ring on her finger. Walking home, she stopped by the river. She took the ring off and threw it into the water. A small, symbolic rebellion. Almost home, she remembered the divorce. What now? When she arrived, Martin was sitting there, head bowed. "I promised you wouldn't have to worry," she said softly. "I got the £500. He smiled and turned to her. "You should thank Mrs. Marion." "No, she was busy," Eleanor lied quickly. "We'll pay it off. Slowly." They danced in the kitchen that night. But the joy didn't last. Less than a month later, Martin suffered a heart attack on the bus and died. In the silence that followed, Eleanor saw the envelope on the table. The paper inside was beginning to wrinkle. It read, "Dear Prescott." She sat at her desk. She needed to write. "Dear Andrew, if you're willing, please arrange for a divorce. I'm ready." She folded the letter with care, placed it in an envelope marked "Strictly Private," and went to bed. The night would not end until that letter was sent. Eleanor overslept the next morning. Rushing out the door for work, she dropped the letter to Andrew into the nearest mailbox. Now, all she could do was wait. When he returned from England, surely he would reach out. And then, perhaps, she could finally imagine a future with Richard. A week passed, and still no response. Every evening, Eleanor sorted through the mail. She hesitated to leave the house, afraid she might miss a call, but nothing ever came. With growing disappointment, she assumed Andrew must still be abroad. By Saturday, she decided to go out. Her last phone conversation with Richard had been vague. She needed to see him, even if she couldn't tell him the whole truth. Richard seemed just as eager to see her, and she felt guilty for avoiding him that past Wednesday. The weekend brought comfort. They planned to meet on Sunday, and again on Monday. But by the time Wednesday came, and still no word from Andrew Prescott, Eleanor's anxiety began to show. "You seem a little distant," Richard said as they sat in the car outside her building after a late-night movie. "No, not at all," Eleanor replied quickly, not wanting him to suspect anything. For a moment she considered telling him everything, but the words never came. "Was it something I said?" She looked at him. His soft blonde hair glowed under the warm streetlight, but her reply died in her throat. "Maybe it's something I didn't say," he joked. Eleanor smiled, almost relieved, and the moment passed. "If something's bothering you, you can tell me." His voice was gentle. Then he added, "My mother said something similar yesterday, that I should be really sure before I commit to anything." Her stomach turned. Eleanor hated his hesitation around marriage, and the way he discussed their private life with his mother. She might forgive his doubts, but her pride kept her silent, especially when he held her like he wanted more, while her mind resisted. "No," she said, pulling away before the kiss could happen. "Come on, Eleanor. We know each other. You know I love you." But she remained firm, just like the times before. "I think I'll go up," she said, stepping out of his arms. And then it struck her like lightning. Had she always been distant with Richard because, deep down, she was carrying that marriage certificate like a silent burden? "I'll call you," he said as he drove off, not waiting for her to go inside. Eleanor climbed the stairs slowly. She wanted peace and had none. Andrew was gone. Richard, almost too present. The next morning, Eleanor woke feeling slightly better. Mildred's contagious energy at work helped ease the tension. Even without a call from Richard, she stayed hopeful. Maybe, just maybe, the letter would be waiting at home. "And what about the paper today, pretty girl?" joked Joe, the newsman, as she nearly walked past him. "Sorry, Joe, my head's elsewhere." "Hope he's worth all that thinking." "He is," she smiled, taking the newspaper. But disappointment met her at the door again. Mrs. Whitmore always left the mail on the hallway table. It was empty. "No letters for me today, Mrs. Whitmore?" "Nothing yet, dear. Are you expecting something important?" "Maybe tomorrow. Nothing urgent." Eleanor ate dinner out of habit, not hunger. She'd do the dishes tomorrow. For now, she needed a moment to herself. She considered writing Andrew another letter, this time marked urgent, but didn't want to seem desperate. So she opened the newspaper, and the world collapsed. There he was, a clear photo of Andrew Prescott at Logan Airport in Boston, next to a stunning woman on his arm. But what made her eyes widen were the words in the headline, "Andrew Prescott seeks to reconcile with wife." Shaken, Eleanor read the full article. Andrew had returned from a successful trip to England. Elvira Newman, his most recent public companion, was waiting for him, surrounded by reporters. He gave no interviews at the airport, only promised he'd speak on personal matters soon. Eleanor imagined it, him arriving at the office, seeing the letter marked confidential. She read on. A reporter had asked about Elvira. "Is there something serious between you two?" Andrew hesitated, then said, "How could there be if I intend to reconcile with my wife?" She froze. With every sentence she feared seeing her name, but he said nothing more. She exhaled, half relieved, half furious. How dare he? He could have called. Instead, he went to the press, like they were in some unfinished love story. Eleanor had had enough. She rushed out to the nearest phone booth. Mrs. Whitmore wouldn't have minded if she used the home phone, but Eleanor needed privacy. The phone company refused to give his private number. She cursed the bureaucracy in silence. Back at the apartment, she felt different. The night before, she might have lost control. Now, in the daylight, she could handle it. All she needed was a conversation, an amicable divorce, nothing more. The next day, she stepped out from work for a moment, bought cookies for Mildred, then entered a phone booth. "Prescott Corporation," said the familiar voice. "May I speak with Mr. Prescott, please?" "One moment. May I ask who's calling?" "Mrs. Smith," she lied instinctively. She was transferred to his secretary. She tried to sound charming. "I'd love to speak with Andrew, personally." "I'm sorry, Mr. Prescott isn't taking calls today," May I take a message? No, thank you. She hung up. Determined, she stepped out, handed the cookies to Mildred, then had an idea. She'd go to Prescott Corporation, in person. The secretary confirmed Andrew was in the building. All Eleanor had to do was wait. Do you know where Mr. Thornton is? She asked. Try the post office, Mildred joked. But seeing Eleanor's face, she understood. You can count on me, even with Richard, she added gently. Eleanor thanked her, asked for the afternoon off. Mr. Radcliffe didn't ask questions. Before leaving, she passed a mirror, thought of the women seen beside Andrew in photos. The old slacks wouldn't do. She returned home. In minutes, she transformed. A burnt orange wool dress, a matching coat, a classic updo, a tasteful hat. She swapped bags, something simple. The mirror now reflected a woman with purpose. But as she neared Prescott Corporation, the nerves returned. There wasn't even a cafe nearby to hide in. She entered. The receptionist greeted her immediately. Can I help you? I'd like to see Mr. Prescott. He's busy. He'll want to see me, Eleanor said, smiling confidently. Then, leaning closer, she whispered, Could you tell him his wife is here? The effect was immediate. The receptionist stammered, One moment, Mrs. Prescott? A call was made. Eleanor almost lost her breath. He wants me to take you to his office, the young woman said. Eleanor stepped into the elevator, trying to recall all the anger she'd felt, all the words she meant to say. Soon, she'd be face to face with Andrew Prescott, and everything, her freedom, her future with Richard, depended on that conversation. She stepped inside. But it still wasn't Andrew's office. The receptionist took only a few seconds to introduce her to Leighton, the secretary with a stern expression, who immediately stood up. Mr. Prescott is, she began. But Eleanor never learned what he was, because the sound of a door opening cut Leighton off and captured Eleanor's attention completely. Her eyes locked onto a tall man with dark hair and understated elegance, standing at the threshold. And it was the moment their eyes met that Eleanor felt her knees weaken. She recognized him instantly, despite the slight silver now at his temples, something he hadn't had 6 years ago. Andrew began to smile as he approached, and that alone was a surprise. Eleanor had never seen him smile like that. "My dear," he said with unexpected warmth, "what a pleasant surprise." Before she could escape the embrace, his arm was around her shoulders, guiding her through the door, clearly leading into his office. Still holding her close, Andrew spoke to his secretary. "Hold all calls. I don't want to be interrupted. It's not every day my lovely wife comes to visit." In the brief seconds it took to get inside, Eleanor's emotions shifted from apprehension to indignation. "How dare you?" she asked, trying to break free. But he made no move to let go. Her face burned at the way Andrew looked at her, and even more when their eyes met again, and he saw the fury in hers. "Who would have thought you'd turn into such a stunning swan?" "But I wasn't such an ugly duckling 6 years ago," she snapped, furious at his condescension. "True, but you have to admit you weren't quite as polished as you are now," he said with a slight smile, his gaze steady. And before she could recover from the jab, he added coldly, "And if I may say so, I think you had help getting yourself to look like this." "Look like this?" she repeated, now fully on alert. "If you must know, no one pays for my clothes but me. In fact, I'm perfectly capable of making them myself." "Really?" Andrew raised an eyebrow, skeptical, then added as if recalling, "Actually, I reviewed our marriage certificate last night. You were a seamstress. Congratulations on the upgrade." "Listen, Andrew, I didn't come here to debate my career. I came—" "Sit down, Eleanor," he interrupted with an ambiguous smile. "I'm sure this conversation will go more smoothly if you're comfortable." She took a deep breath, sat, and tried to stay focused. You received my letter, of course. Of course. Before you announced to the press that you wanted a reconciliation. Don't you have a private phone? No. The number on the letter was my landlady's. You live in a boarding house. What did that matter? She stared at him, incredulous, but his grey eyes told her he wouldn't move on until his questions were answered. So she gave more than he asked, hoping to move things along.
Mrs. Whitmore has arthritis. 6 years ago, she renovated the upstairs and advertised for a quiet tenant. That's where I moved, right after Martin passed away. Your stepfather objected to the move? Martin died a month after. And you decided to leave the house you'd shared? The rent was too high, she said impulsively. You just received £500 and couldn't afford it? That expensive? His sarcasm began to show. That money didn't last long. Didn't think it would. What are you doing for work these days? Because it looks like you haven't asked me for money since. I appreciate that, by the way. I never asked because I never wanted to. Every penny I have, I've earned. Which isn't much, and leaves nothing left over, he said, not unkindly, but with a disarming charm. She relaxed slightly, even smiled. Actually, I'm paid quite well. But yes, I do look forward to payday. Andrew seemed to enjoy the lighter tone, but his eyes held a trace of irony when he noted, You don't wear your wedding ring. I threw it in the river. Recently? Oh no, just a few hours after the ceremony. I see, he said, neutrally. I don't understand why you made that public statement. I just want to be free. The smile vanished. His eyes grew colder. Eleanor's heart pounded before he said dryly, So, what did you decide? What do you mean? If you want a divorce, no law is stopping you. We've been separated 6 years. Our marriage was never consummated. You could have had it annulled. I thought you preferred a quiet divorce, away from the press. Ah, so that's it, he exclaimed, satisfied. At first I thought you wanted money, but now I see that's not it. Of course not. I just want my freedom. I wasn't sure. That's why I agreed to see you. If it were about money, you'd have shown up years ago. I told you. I want nothing from you. She stood furious. So did he. Calmly, he said, I believe you. I believe all you want is a quiet divorce. She met his gaze, touched, and nodded. Yes, you understand perfectly. That's all I want. Why? Because I want to marry someone else. His expression changed instantly. Clearly, he hadn't seen that coming. It's urgent, she continued, firm. Please, Andrew. I need to be free as soon as possible. He looked at her for a long moment. Then, with a cold, taunting voice, Are you pregnant? You bastard, she whispered. The slap echoed. He blinked, then smiled. Was that for being right or for being offensive? I'm not pregnant. First woman to ever slap me. And you're the first man I've ever hit. Then he kissed her. She resisted, but the kiss overwhelmed her. When she pulled back, I didn't come here for that. I didn't get to kiss the bride at the wedding. You didn't have the right. Does that mean you agree to the separation? I was just evening the score. After the slap, be reasonable. All right. Return the £500 and I'll start the divorce. Quietly. What? No interest. You did me a favor. Now I return it. You paid me to marry you, and divorce was never part of the deal. You want out. You'll have to pay. You bastard. Maybe you were a little naive. You forced me to reveal my finances. She raised her hand. He dodged, sat her on his desk. Let me go! He laughed. Sorry. Why should you be? Maybe I'll tell you next time. There won't be a next time. Will you face the scandal alone? Go to hell, Andrew Prescott! She left, devastated. Where would she find £500? Later, after calming down, she changed clothes. At 6, Richard arrived. I called the studio. Madge said you weren't feeling well. How are you? I'm okay. You shouldn't be alone. I've waited too long. Silence. Will you marry me, Eleanor? She nodded. Let him believe her silence meant yes. After he left, she opened the newspaper. Who is the mysterious Mrs. Prescott? They hadn't revealed her name yet. But for how long? After a weekend drowned in her own anguish, Eleanor arrived at work, certain her appearance couldn't look worse. That conviction was reinforced by Mildred's careful glance. Feeling better in your stomach? She asked, with a falsely innocent tone, though Mildred herself had invented the excuse. I'm feeling better, thanks, Eleanor replied, clearly indicating she had no intention of revisiting Friday's issue. The downside of this job was that it left the mind too free to think. And Eleanor couldn't stop replaying everything that had happened. Every detail of her encounter with Andrew Prescott haunted her like an echo. She carried the responsibility of telling everything to Richard before the engagement became public. But how could she tell him that, legally, she was still married to another man? She was engaged to one and married to another. The irony was too cruel to ignore. She sighed unknowingly, and the sound caught Mildred's attention, who watched her with concern. Eleanor simply looked away. My God, where will I get £500? She thought, anxious. Of course, Richard had that money, but how could she ask? How could she accept? She'd already taken money from a man once, not for herself, and knew exactly where that had led her. Repeating the mistake would be too much. If I were you, I'd go to bed early tonight, advised Mildred, echoing the words Richard had said when he said goodbye on Friday. Good idea, Eleanor responded, concealing her real reason. That night, she would celebrate the engagement. Or not. She still didn't know. When she got home, she was determined. She would tell Richard everything. She loved him too much to stay silent. And if, after that, he left her, well, that was a risk she had to take. But she'd barely stepped inside when the phone rang. She hurried upstairs, certain it was Richard. She smiled gratefully at Mrs. Whitmore, who left to give her privacy. Good evening, said Andrew Prescott's voice with that unmistakable tone of confidence. Did you just get home from work? Yes, Eleanor answered, trying to control the irritation building quickly. Great. I wanted to speak with you before dinner. She barely had time to understand why he was calling when he said the phrase that infuriated her. Dinner with me tonight. That was too much. How dare he? On what grounds did he think she'd drop everything for dinner with him? Thank you for the invitation, Mr. Prescott, but I'd rather throw myself into the Thames than share a meal with you. He laughed, and that threw her off balance. He laughed heartily as if he'd just heard the best retort of the day. Then, still amused, he added, We never had a serious talk about our divorce, did we? I thought we did, she replied curtly. You really thought I was serious when I asked for the money back? Of course, she responded hesitantly, and hated herself for holding on to a shred of hope. I think this is the classic case of my wife doesn't understand me, he joked. I'm not your wife, she whispered, despite knowing she still was, legally. I have a document that proves you are, he countered calmly. Unfortunately, I have a copy too. I wanted to confirm that it really happened.
"Aren't the 500 pounds proof?"
What does that matter now? You still beat yourself up for accepting that, don't you? She didn't answer. Now Andrew's voice softened, almost sympathetic. "So, dinner together tonight to discuss all this?" he insisted. Eleanor hesitated. Telling Richard the truth was her priority. But if she at least secured a quiet divorce, she'd have something concrete to offer her fiancé, a solution. "Where shall we meet?" she found herself asking, against all her intentions. "I'm old-fashioned. I'll pick you up." "It's not a date," she retorted, and hung up before he could say more. She stared at the phone. Had she accepted or rejected? Even she didn't know. "Would you like some tea, dear?" Mrs. Whitmore asked. "No, thank you. I need to get ready. I'll go out tonight." But a sudden fear hit her. What if Andrew arrived just as Richard was coming? She rushed to the phone and called Richard. "Richard, I'm not feeling well. I think it'd be best to postpone dinner."
He regretted it, but didn't insist. He'd talk to her tomorrow. Eleanor climbed the stairs, relieved but uneasy. Did she have a dinner with Andrew or not? As a precaution, she bathed and chose an elegant brown velvet outfit, ready by 8. At 10 after 8, nothing. At 8:30, still nothing. Then she heard voices in the hall, and seconds later the bell rang. She opened the door cautiously. There he was, Andrew Prescott, in an impeccable dark suit and a gaze that took in every detail of her appearance. "May I come in?" "Certainly," she answered automatically. "You didn't tell your landlady who I am, did you?" "No." "Aren't you ashamed of me?" "Of course not." "I'm not ashamed of you either," he said with a smile. "No man would be. You look stunning." She blushed. His charm still moved her, despite everything. "Since our goal tonight is just to settle loose ends, it doesn't matter whether I'm stunning or dull." His smile turned into a smirk. Eleanor had the distinct feeling she'd ruined the tone. But maybe that was better. They went to a private club, away from cameras and journalists' curiosity. "To ensure our privacy," he explained. She smiled, but that smile faded at the menu. "I'll have whatever you choose." "My wife wants bœuf bourguignon, and the same for me," he said to the waiter. She glared. "You didn't need to say I was your wife." "But you are, aren't you? Not for much longer, I hope." "Calm down, Eleanor. We've got the whole night to discuss the details of our ending." And the way he said it, with light humor and provocation, made her, against her own will, smile. During the ride, Eleanor paid attention to the streets they passed through, too much to notice any detour. She only realized they had arrived at the Prescott and Company building when the car stopped, and the conversation about the divorce still hadn't begun. Andrew calmly turned off the engine without looking at her. Eleanor remained behind the wheel for a few seconds, aware that she needed to resolve everything right there before he formally said goodbye without a word. "Let's talk in your apartment," he suggested, confidently. She shook her head, but he was already getting out of the car, opening the passenger door for her without waiting for permission. She swallowed hard as they went up. The building's lobby smelled of old wood. He opened her door before she could hesitate. "Nice apartment," he commented, walking into the living room with a nod. "Want me to light the fireplace? It's still cold for this time of year." She shivered at the gesture. He lit the fireplace, brought his armchair closer, and looked at Eleanor, who spoke, trying to get the conversation going. "Why is the divorce so urgent, Eleanor?" He sighed slowly, as if weighing his words. "Because there are reasons. First, Richard still doesn't know about our marriage." Her chest tightened. "He's about to propose to me," she continued, voice trembling. "But his mother is fiercely against divorce.
I didn't know when to tell him. He stood still, analyzing her deeply. And that's why you want it resolved quickly before he finds out? She closed her eyes tightly. Yes. A heavy silence followed. Andrew took a step forward and sat in front of her.
I understand, he said softly. I heard you called me 2 weeks ago asking if I was in the United States. That's why I wrote, hoping for a reply. I understand the panic. She felt tears forming. Then why did you reveal our union to the press? He shrugged. My letter was marked strictly confidential. It was too much, he admitted. I opened it to see who had the nerve to ask for a divorce. She frowned, trying to understand. He went on. I had the impression that you wanted to sell our marriage as currency. That's why I publicly stated I wanted to reconcile with my wife, he explained gently, getting closer to her. It was to let you know I didn't agree. She opened her mouth, confused. He gently held her face. Forgive me, he asked. She would never forget the touch of his fingers on her lips. Warmth returned to her body. Andrew. He gave a soft smile. You protected me by keeping my name out of the papers. Will you now give me your forgiveness? She nodded, emotional. I think I will. That delicate gesture, the way he looked at her, brought a wave of emotions. Thank you, he murmured. But there's still something we need to settle. He stood up and extended his hand. Come have dinner. We'll talk better there. She hesitated, but when she saw his look, she found the strength to take his arm and walk with him to the door. In that moment, Eleanor no longer saw only the man with whom she had a legal agreement, but someone who deeply understood her. Someone willing to be a partner in this new beginning. From the pain in her head upon regaining consciousness, Eleanor understood that something serious had happened. Her first impulse was to try to sit up, but the bandage wrapped around her forehead made her hesitate. The bed was definitely not hers. She was in a hospital. She coughed and felt a sharp pain in her ribs. The only thing she could remember was Mrs. Whitmore asking her to bring bread. After that, her mind was blank. She tried to turn her head and look for someone, but the pain made movement difficult. There was no other bed in the room. It was just hers. That felt strange. She couldn't afford a private room. Why had they put her there? A metallic wheel noise made her look toward the door. Good. You're awake, said a nurse in white, approaching with a professional smile, placing a thermometer under her tongue while taking her pulse. I know it hurts. I'll be back with something for that. Eleanor tried to ask questions, but with a thermometer in her mouth, she had to stay silent as the nurse evaluated her. The nurse calmly noted the readings and finally removed the thermometer. Nurse, what happened to me? It seems you were hit by a taxi right after stepping off the curb, she explained as though she'd answered this before. But don't worry about that now, Mrs. Prescott. I'll get you something for your headache. Mrs. Prescott. The word hit her hard. Panic and confusion mixed with pain. Nurse! She called, but the nurse had already left the room. When she returned, she efficiently administered an injection. Soon, Eleanor felt the world spin and her thoughts dissolve into fog. When she woke again, the room was dim. The ajar door let in a beam of light from the corridor. A different nurse entered. How are you feeling? Better. A little, she answered with effort. Great. Then I think we can allow a visitor, the nurse hinted, implying she knew who Eleanor would like to see. What time is it? 9:30. It's not visiting hours anymore. Your husband is talking with the social worker, the nurse finished with a smile. Mr. Prescott came to see you. Eleanor tried to prepare. She sat up in bed even though her ribs protested.
At the sound of approaching footsteps, she remembered the last moment they were together. Andrew entered, and for a moment she didn't know how to react. If you wanted to avoid meeting with the solicitor, you could have said so. No need to throw yourself in front of a taxi, he said with light sarcasm. Oh, Andrew, I really was on my way to the solicitor's office. They told me you only remembered you had to bring bread for Mrs. Whitmore. She must be worried. I need to talk to her. I've already taken care of that. I went to see her personally. Brought the bread, he added, making her laugh despite the pain. What happened to me? A few bruised ribs, a bad headache, but nothing broken. You'll recover, he assured. She smiled. Then she gave him a worried look. Why are they calling me Mrs. Prescott? Your marriage certificate was in your bag. It was your only identification, and since my name was on it, they contacted me. And the private room? I requested it. Naturally, I'll pay for it. I can't accept. You'll have to. What kind of husband would I be if I let my wife pay her own hospital bill? She fell silent. Then something else occurred to her. If the hospital knows who I am, then the newspapers... He didn't answer. He simply held her hand firmly. It was in the afternoon edition, wasn't it? Yes, he answered softly. I want to see. It's not worth it, he tried to dissuade her. I want to see the paper. He hesitated, but agreed. Okay, I'll bring it tomorrow. She didn't insist. When he stood up, she whispered, I don't want to see anyone else, please. I've already left instructions, he replied, and she smiled with relief. Thank you for the lilies, they're beautiful. A touch of spring, he said, kissing her forehead, just like you. After Andrew left, the nurse returned as if waiting and administered another injection. Eleanor fell asleep quickly, thinking of the gentle touch of that farewell. The morning sun illuminated the lilies in the vase. Eleanor smiled. But reality soon returned with force. Her name in the newspapers, Richard. Would he have read it? Nurse Jenkins entered, cheerful. So glad to see you in good spirits. After the doctor's visit, we'll bathe you. Oh, and your friends have already called. Friends? Your husband called early, and also a Mrs. Mildred. Mildred. If Mildred knew, Richard would soon know too. Her stomach tightened. She needed to speak to him first, but maybe it was too late. Eleanor was too exhausted to take the pill and sleep immediately. She believed she fell asleep naturally. Still, she woke multiple times throughout the night. She had to admit, after Andrew's visit, she felt calmer. But the worry about Richard didn't leave her. She tried to imagine his feelings. In one of those near-midnight moments, she made a decision. Her conscience told her she needed to act. She closed her eyes again, convinced she could only put her plan into action after the morning medical visit. Early in the morning, she heard the faint stir of someone approaching. It was Nurse Jenkins. She opened her eyes and realized that, despite the pain, she had rested better. Ah, that's more like it. Brighter eyes, almost ready for breakfast. I'm hungry, she lied, masking her plan with casualness. Great, Jenkins celebrated, grabbing the thermometer. 37? Almost normal. I think you can even take a bath today. Eleanor wanted to wash before seeing the doctor, and she did, with the few resources available, while the nurse attended to another patient. The effort caused her pain, but she lay back down, knowing she had several hours before the doctor arrived. When Jenkins returned, Eleanor answered all her questions clearly. At the end, she asked casually, "And my clothes? Have they arrived yet?" Tired of nightgowns? Jenkins smiled. They're here. But if you plan to dress today, I'm sorry. The doctor won't allow it. You'll need bed rest for several days. Shortly after, Dr. Thompson entered, accompanied by Nurse Jenkins.
Eleanor, seated on the bed, smiled and declared with determination, "I'm feeling well. I've decided I'm going home today." The doctor frowned, a prelude to a prudent sermon, but Eleanor smiled slyly and, in a sweet voice, spoke, "Today is our first wedding anniversary. I need to have dinner with my husband at our home." Dr. Thompson stared at her over his glasses. Eleanor prayed he would understand. Then he said,
"If I refuse, you risk a relapse. Will you promise to rest?" "Yes, I promise," she replied, eyes shining. "Then I'll send Nurse Jenkins to inform Mr. Prescott." He hesitated. "No," Eleanor interrupted. "I want it to be a surprise. And Andrew will only return tonight." Victorious, yet exhausted from the theatrics, Eleanor thought of Andrew. He had been gentle during her recovery and promised to visit today at the same time as yesterday. She wondered if he'd be upset about her hospital escape or relieved she was finally moving forward with the divorce. Nurse Jenkins returned with her clothes and helped her dress. She commented confidentially, "Even though medicine thinks it's absurd, my intuition says it's the most romantic thing I've ever seen." "Sit here," she said, helping Eleanor get comfortable to wait. Soon, a taxi arrived. It took her home, with instructions to park in front and wait until she was inside. Eleanor thanked the nurse, worn out but grateful. Arriving at the building, her legs felt weak. The taxi nearly knocked her over when braking. As soon as the key turned in the door, Mrs. Whitmore appeared, anxious and affectionate. "Oh dear, what a fright! Are you okay?" "I'm okay, yes, Mrs. Whitmore," Eleanor replied weakly. "Good, but no going upstairs without sitting down and having tea." While resting in her landlady's living room, she heard Andrew mentioned. "I must confess I didn't believe him when he said he was your husband," Mrs. Whitmore said. "You never mentioned that." Eleanor swallowed hard with guilt. "I was trying to forget it completely," she said, without meeting her eyes. "Separations are complicated, but he seems a lovely man," Mrs. Whitmore commented kindly. Their conversation was interrupted by instinct. Eleanor needed to call Richard. She picked up the phone. "Eleanor?" heard Richard's cold voice. "Richard, Where are you?" "At home." "I'm coming over." The call ended there. Eleanor was terrified. His reaction was too distant. Mrs. Whitmore returned to the room. "Richard's coming?" "Yes," Eleanor confirmed, uneasy. "He doesn't know about Andrew, does he?" the landlady asked, concerned. Eleanor nodded. "Go upstairs. I'll receive him." Eleanor climbed with effort. She entered the apartment and instinctively closed the door quietly. She barely sat on the sofa when there were strong knocks. Richard was already there. She opened the door slowly. His face was like a mask, hard, cold, tense. "A surprise," he said, stepping in quickly. "You look too well for someone who's been hospitalized." She didn't respond immediately. Her knees were weak, her stomach in knots. "Richard, please listen to me." "You could have told me. You chose to keep me in the dark. Even someone at the office called me Mr. Prescott, the substitute." Eleanor tried to explain, but he approached aggressively and grabbed her arm tightly. "You embarrassed me, Eleanor. You toyed with my trust." "Let go," she pleaded, scared by his tone. Before he could react further, the door swung open. Andrew appeared in the doorway, his eyes blazing. "Let her go. Now." Richard took a step back, surprised. Eleanor ran into Andrew's arms, and he shielded her with his body. "Get out of here," Andrew ordered Richard. "Now." A tense silence followed. Richard cast one last glance and left without another word. Eleanor collapsed on the sofa, trembling. Andrew knelt beside her. "You okay?" She nodded, tears falling silently.
Gather your things, he said firmly but gently. You're coming with me. I won't leave you here alone in this state. She hesitated, but deep down she knew. She needed peace. She needed to breathe. She needed to leave. She silently nodded.
Wrapped in the blanket Andrew had draped over her shoulders during the drive to the countryside, Eleanor struggled to fight off sleep. "Still resisting until the end, huh?" he remarked, without taking his eyes off the road but glancing at her discreetly now and then. "Sleep now, and the trip will be smoother. I promise I won't tell anyone if you snore." The gentle tease brought a smile, despite her exhaustion. "I thought you lived in Beacon Hill," she said, recalling the address the taxi driver had mentioned when trying to take her home. "The apartment is convenient, but I was born in the country and I miss open landscapes." Surprised by this sudden memory, Eleanor whispered softly, "Did you resent Lydia inheriting the house?" "You remember everything," he answered with mild admiration. "No, I didn't resent it. That was my father's wish, that she receive the property." They paused as the car stopped on a grassy path. He helped her out. "Come, Eleanor," he said. "The housekeeper's already waiting." They entered the cozy home, and she was led to a bedroom with a double bed, already prepared with pink satin nightgowns by Mrs. Vale. Andrew helped her sit on the bed. "You can change on your own." "I can, yes." He tucked the blankets around her. Divine," she sighed in relief. "I'm glad," he smiled. "I believe you'll spend the entire day in bed." "Where are you going?" she asked cautiously. "I have an appointment this afternoon," he informed. "Sorry," she muttered, feeling guilty. "He couldn't resist," Eleanor said as Andrew stepped away. "Are you sure you don't want help getting dressed?" "I'm fine." With her settled, Mrs. Vale brought lunch, a fragrant homemade soup. While arranging the pillows, the housekeeper commented, "Andrew was clear. No sofa all day. Move gently, but don't stay still." They spent the afternoon chatting about the house, about Bert, Mrs. Vale's husband, and about Andrew. Eleanor discovered Mrs. Vale had known him since childhood. "When he was a baby, the first word he said was Vale," she recounted proudly. Mrs. Vale also explained Andrew's connection to Lydia, his father's second wife. "Lydia was very young when she married Mr. Prescott. She was more of a stepmother to Andrew than anything else," she said evenly. Later, Eleanor received a revitalizing bath. She ate well for dinner and let sleep overtake her under Mrs. Vale's care. In the early morning, she was awakened by a nightmare featuring Richard. She switched on the light and sat up in bed, unable to fall back asleep. She tried to chase away the fear when Andrew appeared in the doorway. "You okay?" he asked calmly. "I heard you scream." Her chest raced when she saw him there, dressed only in a robe, hair disheveled. "I had a horrible nightmare. About Richard." Andrew comforted her. "He appeared in the dream?" "Yes. It's gone now." Andrew sat beside her, taking her hands. He noticed the bruises on her arms. "I saw the injuries. Dr. Thornton said you need to rest." "I'll never be what they expect me to be," she murmured. "Then will you sleep now?" "And tea?" "I'll bring it," he assured. Eleanor appreciated the moment, thanked him, and settled to rest. The next morning, she found a cold tea beside the bed and felt guilty. Later, Andrew returned in casual clothes, signaling he planned to stay all day. "You're not going to work today?" she asked. "Not today," he replied leisurely. "I thought you'd prefer to stay here, rather than with that animal." She looked up defensively. "I wasn't talking about Richard, but you're being harsh yourself." "He hurt you," Andrew remarked. "That's not an exaggeration." "I was scared," she confessed. He moved closer, suggesting, "How about morning rest and an hour of reading this afternoon?" Eleanor made herself comfortable in bed, pleased with the compromise. Later, Andrew brought her a soft robe. "Put that on," he said. "Please place the chair by the window," she requested. He arranged everything, and through the window she saw the expansive green fields of Concord. "How beautiful," she sighed. He watched her, not the view. Feeling he was about to kiss her, Eleanor pulled away. "Andrew?" He stepped back and handed her a magazine. "Read. It's not time to go further." She nodded, and he left, visibly restrained. Mrs. Vale appeared with a tea tray, helping her lie down and speaking gently about Andrew's instructions for rest. Alone, Eleanor wondered why she felt irreversibly torn between Andrew and Richard, the latter who had hurt her. Was there no room left in her heart? Eleanor glanced at the clock. Nearly 7 in the morning. She decided to delay leaving the bed for another half hour. It was Sunday, and she wanted to enjoy breakfast downstairs in peace. Bert and Vale had been so kind during the past 9 days. On Friday, Bert insisted on taking her to the shopping center. Even though hesitant, he stayed by her side while she bought a lipstick, always attentive. And Andrew, despite the conflicts of the previous week when he admonished her to control emotions, did not appear on Saturday. But on Sunday, he entered the room as if nothing had happened. "How are you feeling?" he asked casually, surprising her. She found herself answering immediately. "Better, thank you. So well that I want to leave tomorrow."
"For heaven's sake," Andrew exclaimed, startled. "You can't rush off after what he did."
"Richard has nothing to do with this," she stated firmly.
"Then why decide to go now?"
He relaxed, sat on the bed, eyes softened, and said, "By the way, I spoke with Mr. Radcliffe, your boss, by phone. I told him what happened. He doesn't expect your return for at least 2 weeks."
"Really?"
She was surprised.
"He called Mrs. Whitmore?"
"Yes, I got her number." He continued. Eleanor, although saying she was well, likely wouldn't manage the stairs in her apartment without exhaustion. Reflecting on her thoughts, she realized that leaving meant awareness. She was willing to return to her life. She dressed quietly and went down for breakfast. The dining room was full of calm, with Vale pouring tea. Andrew sat in his office. Hesitant, Eleanor asked for coffee and feared disturbing him, but Vale reassured her. Andrew would be glad to see her. After breakfast, she walked around the wide grounds of the country house. She adored the fields and the silence, but something hit her, suddenly. This place had already become part of her. What she feared most was discovering she couldn't leave anymore. She convinced herself she needed to leave before it was too late, before his memory tamed her completely. Back at the house, she saw Bert busy at the car and, knowing she needed space, walked to the backyard. Andrew appeared with a jacket. "I thought you went for a walk," he said slowly, handing her the coat. "Just a stroll," she murmured. He led her away from the house with contained grace, almost playfully. "How did you sleep?" he asked, stopping in front of a gate. "Excellent." "Any more nightmares?" He lightly touched her arm. "No," she replied. Then he asked directly, "Are you still thinking about him?" She flustered, but answered firmly, "What do you think?" "I think it's foolish to think of him again," he said, stepping away. "And that other man? You never told me anything about before Coleman." "There was no one," she snapped, irritated, refusing to say more. But he drew close again, eyes fixed on hers, and soon they were in each other's arms. The kiss began softly, apologetic, but she yielded. He desired her, and she desired him. Touches became intense, unrestrained, skirting her limits. Eleanor felt fear and excitement, but succumbed. When she pulled back, panting, she tried to find words. "I thought you maybe wouldn't," she murmured, unable to express the whirlwind of feelings. Andrew looked at her tenderly, Sensing her hesitation,
"You don't need to say anything," he whispered. "I just want you to trust me." As he drew near, Eleanor felt warmth envelop her and, almost without thinking, let herself be guided once more, moved only by feeling. The next morning she awoke at 6, determined to leave. When she went downstairs, Andrew was returning home, dressed in a dark suit, suitcase in hand. His return made Eleanor's heart race. "Did you miss me?" he asked bluntly. She composed her voice. "As much as you did?" And she added, "I'm ready to go back tomorrow." "Are you sure?" Andrew asked, his gaze darkening. She nodded and mentioned that Bert would give her a ride. His expression fell, and, breaking the silence, "This isn't a place for permanent contracts," he murmured. Eleanor returned to the bedroom with a knot in her throat and sad eyes. When Andrew entered, she shrank. "You're crying?" "May I?" she whispered. "Help me not to see you cry," he said, kissing her eyes. "Why do you ask me painful questions?" She wanted to flee, but he enveloped her again, two hearts struggling, taciturn yet passionate. Kissed, caressed in silent complicity until Andrew spoke between kisses, "You are my woman." And Eleanor allowed herself to believe in the reconciliation she once feared. Only one night remained, and they both knew it. Eleanor slept deeply, but her slumber was soon invaded by sweet memories of what had happened the night before with Andrew. She awoke suddenly, a smile lighting her face, until she realized he wasn't there. For a few moments she let happiness wash over her. Even alone, her heart pounded, remembering the unhurried surrender, the tenderness with which Andrew led her into depths of affection she had never imagined. Those were sublime moments, and she wondered with apprehension, had it been as extraordinary for him as it was for her? Insecurity grew. Sophisticated women had crossed Andrew's life. Had he lost control because of her? Or was it just desire abandoning its usual logic? A bitter thought formed. Had everything been calculated?
confused, she got up, took a quick shower, and dressed at frantic speed as if trying to banish the treacherous thoughts. But they followed her every gesture, reminding her of the night she fled from Andrew with tears in her eyes. And now, had he used that act of love to prevent her from canceling the marriage? She was the product of his choices. She knew it. He had been deeply annoyed when she mentioned annulling the marriage. The weight of reality crushed her, and she lay down again, feeling her heart heavy. Without strength to endure more anguish, Eleanor decided to face what she felt. She descended to the lounge and found the housekeeper, Mrs. Vale, hurrying from the kitchen. "Good morning, Mrs. Vale," she said before asking where Andrew was. "Good morning, dear," replied the housekeeper kindly. "And eager for breakfast?" "Just coffee," murmured Eleanor, her stomach churning. "Wait, has Mr. Prescott had his?" "He drank it quickly," Mrs. Vale explained. "You missed each other. He went out for target practice, as he does on Saturdays." Eleanor's heart leapt. He had really gone? She inhaled deeply as practical thoughts took over. She hurriedly said goodbye, gathered her suitcase, and ran outside, determined. "Tell Mr. Prescott to wait for me," she instructed the driver. She climbed into the car with a tumultuous spirit. She needed an answer, but not right then. The journey continued with empty chatter until, on the outskirts of Boston, a tire went flat. The setback gave her extra time. Now she would have a moment to breathe before returning to reality.
When she finally stepped out onto the sidewalk alone, her feet carried her without direction to the park, where she allowed herself to sit on a bench and drown in painful memories. She closed her eyes, wanting only clarity. The afternoon wore on, and exhausted, she decided to return. The taxi traveled the streets until it stopped in front of Mrs. Whitmore's house. As she paid, she lifted her eyes, and there, parked in front, was a car identical to Andrew's. Her heart raced. She thought it was coincidence, but the door opened slowly. It wasn't Mrs. Whitmore. It was him. Andrew Prescott stood before her in person.
You went to shoot? She blurted out without thinking. He gave a calm smile. Before he could speak, she heard Mrs. Whitmore's warm voice. Well, my dear, you look wonderful. He went for your lunch, said we wouldn't leave without you. Her knees buckled. He called her our dear, and a hot shiver passed through her. He guided her into the house, uncertain what would happen next.
In her apartment, they found suitcases and boxes, her belongings being sorted.
What is, she began incredulously. What is happening? I thought it'd be easier if I started packing your things, he explained calmly. Packing my things? She exploded. I'm not going anywhere with you, Andrew. You don't know me if you think this plan will satisfy me. He raised an eyebrow, surprised. Her outburst made his face pale. You mean you're not satisfied? He asked firmly. No, she snapped, torn by conflicting emotions. You took me by force. You took me to Greenfields as if I were your lover and wife, he corrected, returning a smile to his face. Paralyzed, she took a deep breath, trying to understand. He approached, his hand gently on her cheek. I didn't want to fall in love. I was afraid. And then he confessed. But when you disappeared this morning, I realized I couldn't live without you. Eleanor's voice faltered, and he moved in to embrace her. I'm in love with you, my lovely wife, he whispered. Those words dismantled every wall she'd built. Her body was overtaken by a sweeping wave. It was love, and he needed to know. I love you too, she whispered, and loving silence fell. Then he took something from his pocket and handed her a bundle, a ring. With this ring, I make you my wife, not just on paper, but in soul. Tears came with tenderness. Andrew held her tight. I love you, my dear wife. And there, wrapped in warmth and the promise of a new beginning, Eleanor and Andrew took the final step toward the happy ending they deserved.